Hello and welcome to this brief introduction of the first discussion in SuSanA's new initiative, the Thematic Discussion Series. This first discussion, starting today, Monday the 9th of February, will be on the sanitation ladder and the next steps in developing the ladder and using the ladder in the post-MDG agenda. Let me just begin by saying a few things on the Thematic Discussion Series. This is a new initiative from SuSanA that looks to engage actors on a focused thematic area, hoping to develop collaborative efforts between thematic leads, relevant SuSanA working groups, SuSanA members, with coordination, moderation, summaries and structure to the discussions, all this being provided by SuSanA. The general methodology for these discussions is that on the SuSanA site, background information will be provided on the topic of the discussion. This has already been provided for this, the sanitation ladder. Last week, I think the discussion or the background document went up. Thematic leads, this will include myself, Patrick Bracken, Elizabeth Kranstrom and Rika Jene will be providing leading questions and regular feedbacks during the discussion. And SuSanA will ensure that there are weekly summaries of the discussions, and maybe at the end we'll be looking at how the discussions can be put together in order to move forward on the particular issue at hand. The first discussion in this series will be, as I mentioned earlier, entitled The Sanitation Ladder, Next Steps, and takes as its starting point probably the Sanitation Ladder, A Need for a Revamp, which was a paper written in 2011 by Elizabeth Kranstrom with several other writers. And this basically was proposing a function-based sanitation ladder as opposed to a technology-based sanitation ladder. And the aim of this discussion will be how will this idea be able to be brought forward in the post-2015 agenda and perhaps used to monitor the Sustainable Development Goals. But let me just begin by looking back a little on the whole idea of the sanitation ladder and where this came from. Well, the ladder, or the use of sanitation ladders, basically they have their history in participatory development processes coming from things like FAST and PRA, and were used to facilitate decision making between or for community members using a ladder that had different sanitation technologies at different rungs on the ladder. And these technologies were described visually with photographs, but also with a set of criteria that made them comparable between each other. And as one progressed up the ladder, then one also generally progressed in complexity, but also the idea was that a greater measure of health protection would be provided by each new run on the ladder. I think one of the first examples that I remember seeing of this was the Lao PDI ladder, which I'm just presenting in this slide, just to give you an idea of how these participatory ladders were used. This one starts very much with an improved traditional practice, which would mean a buried open defecation, slowly moving through a conventional traditional latrine, to a latrine with a lid or a cover over the whole ventilated improved pit would be the fourth run on this ladder. A single pit poor flush was the fifth run, and the top of the ladder in this particular case was considered to be a septic tank system. As I said before, this would be presented in participatory discussions just to facilitate community members to decide at what level they think they could begin and get on to the ladder. Another idea of this ladder was that it had an aspirational character, with the generally accepted wisdom at the time being that as long as you get someone on the ladder, a household will always have the aspiration to move up the ladder to progressive rungs. This was an idea that was also, till today, maintained within the CLTS approach, but not necessarily been proven. I think the recent review by Plan Australia on the sustainability of CLTS quite clearly revealed that there has been no noted movement up the sanitation ladder, and households that began with a very rudimentary latrine didn't necessarily move on to a better version with time. But apart from this facilitating role in sanitation decision making, the sanitation ladder has in a way been turned on its head and used as a descriptive tool to decide, or better to describe, the sanitation situation in a given area. Probably the best known example of this presently is the sanitation ladder that is used by the JMP for monitoring progress towards the Millennium Development Goals, and this particular ladder was introduced in 2008 and used clear technical models, technical definitions to describe improved sanitation, and also then inversely saying where these improved systems aren't available, then it is an unimproved sanitation facility. And this did become slightly refined with time, where they had shared facilities, but shared facilities were still not considered as improved facilities. So on the sanitation ladder of the JMP, improved sanitation is considered still to today as to consist of either a flush or pore flush system to a pipe sewer, to a septic tank, or to a pit latrine. Another technology would be the ventilated improved pit, would be considered improved sanitation, a pit latrine with a slab, or composting toilets. As you can see, these are all clearly quite prescribed technologies. It's a technological prescription for what is improved sanitation, focusing very much on the toilet itself. But a monitoring system that focuses just on the toilet technology generally then does not take the functionality of the entire sanitation system into consideration. And this criticism, which has been quite long-standing, was, I would say, probably most clearly formulated in the 2011 paper, The Sanitation Ladder, A Need for a Revamp, which should be available for download somewhere on the SuSanA site. And the idea of this paper was just to make an initial proposal for a sanitation ladder based on the functioning of the entire sanitation system. This first proposal wasn't aimed to be perfect. Actually, the idea was more to stimulate discussion and move towards an operationalization of the idea of using functionality as the basis for a ladder rather than particular technologies. Okay, what you see in this slide are the 7 steps of the functional sanitation ladder as described in the Quantum paper from 2011. If you look at the first 4 steps, the clear focus initially is on improving health protection through the provision of a sanitation system. So we have moving simply from excreta containment over safe access and availability to grey water management, where we remove standing stagnant water from neighbourhoods, to the 4th step where we have an active pathogen reduction in the wastewater and the excreta or urine and in the different flow streams, simply to protect public health. So in discussing this ladder, it was seen very early on that the primary function of a sanitation system is of course to protect public health. But moving further beyond that and looking from a systems perspective at the functionality of the sanitation system, then we moved on and saying, well, the further improved the sanitation system is, we can also ensure that it has certain environmental functions. And as you can see here, then we move into step 5, where it's looking at how nutrient reuse can be integrated into the system, how the risk for eutrophication of water bodies can be reduced through the recovery and reuse of nutrients, up until the final or the top step in this particular ladder, which was just integrated resource management, looking at how the resource content of the different wastewater flows could be recovered while at the same time covering all the health functions. I should just maybe say here that in each step of this particular ladder, it is assumed that moving on to the next step, all the previous steps, all the functionality of the previous steps are integrated into the next step. So it's always a continuous improvement. But also recognized within this is that the management needs of these systems, the more complex and the more complicated the system becomes, the greater the management need becomes. As I mentioned, this was a first proposal of how a functional ladder could work to replace the technology-based ladder, and at the time and ever since there has been quite a degree of discussion on the use of a functional ladder and on the potential use of a functional ladder in monitoring. And so, with 2015 upon us, with the Millennium Development Goal deadline passing and looking forward to the future Sustainable Development Goals, the question is, in what way could the thinking behind a function-based sanitation ladder be carried forward and perhaps be used to help monitor the Sustainable Development Goals, to move away from simply looking at particular toilet technologies and to move towards looking at how an entire sanitation system functions. And this is pretty much the goal of this first thematic discussion series, or the first discussion in the series. As I mentioned at the start, part of the methodology of these discussions is that there will be thematic leads. I will be one of your thematic leads for this discussion, Patrick Bracken, along with Elizabeth Kvarnström and Richard Jena. Maybe I'll just give you a quick background on each of us. My name is Patrick Bracken. I'm a water resources engineer who has been working since 2002 with sustainable sanitation systems, particularly focusing on the systems approach, looking just beyond the simple technology and trying to consider from cradle to grave, if you will, of the sanitation system. I've contributed to the 2006 World Health Organization guidelines on the safe use of excreta and grey water, and have over 15 years professional experience working particularly in West Africa. Since 2010, I've been working for the AHT Group, a German consultant office, working particularly in agriculture, sanitation, and integrated water resources management. I have the pleasure to have Elizabeth Kvarnström accompanying me here as one of the thematic leads. Elizabeth was one of the driving forces behind the 2011 paper that tried to revamp the sanitation ladder. She's an environmental engineer with a PhD in sanitary engineering, with her research spanning between soil science and sanitary engineering. With her background in sanitation and water, she has worked in projects and settings covering the fields of soil science, recycling, research management, policy economics, capacity development, planning, business models, basically the whole gamut of fields that are covered by sustainable sanitation systems, and was very much the driving force and thinking force behind the paper calling for a revamp and away from the technology-based sanitation ladder towards a function-based sanitation ladder. And I think it's a great honour and pleasure to have her able to accompany our discussions here on the forum. She's currently working as a World Bank operations consultant, particularly on projects in sanitation in Dhaka and Chittagong, Bangladesh. The third member of the thematic lead team is Richard Jena, a doctoral candidate from the University of Catalonia. I'm very pleased has agreed to accompany our discussions here. His training and professional experience has covered water resources management, water and wastewater treatment, rural water supply and sanitation, and a range of environmental engineering projects. He has over 10 years professional experience working in projects in Europe, Eastern Asia and South America, and is specialised in the field of data collection methods, statistical analysis, development of policy tools to support sector-related decision-making, and the sustainability assessment of WASH interventions. Richard has also written quite a few interesting papers on the use of sanitation ladders for monitoring of the sanitation sector, and has an in-depth knowledge of the human rights-based approach that's being used or will be used to monitor the Sustainable Development Goals for sanitation. So I hope With this team of 3, we will be able to at least provide a framework upon which the expertise from the SuSanA Forum will be able to build upon over the next 3 weeks of discussions. Maybe we can just look at how these discussions are envisaged or how they will continue over the next 3 weeks. The timeline is we'll be starting today, Monday the 9th of February, with an initial input, with discussions carrying on over a 3-week period to Friday the 27th of February. There's a webinar planned for the 20th of February. The theme for this webinar has not yet been fixed because we thought it would maybe be a good idea to remain open and see what discussion points come up in the first 2 weeks, and to pick on these and concentrate on these for an in-depth 45-minute discussion session on that Friday. The discussions themselves will be open to all forum users and will be moderated by SuSanA, who will also provide regular summaries of the discussions on an ongoing basis, I think probably at the rhythm of twice a week. Let me just present roughly the content that we have discussed and envisioned for these 3 weeks. This is a first proposal and always open to be changed depending on the views and opinions of the participants. In week 1, we would like to maybe begin at the beginning and look at the evolution of the sanitation ladder. And this move from a technology perspective, a facilitatory tool for sanitation decision making based on individual technologies, to look at the more functional aspects of sanitation systems. We'll be looking maybe at already initial attempts to operationalize the functional ladder, for example what CLUES have been working on, or initial approaches by German Agro Action, Welthungerhilfe, and suggestions from IRC Wash Cost. And hopefully we'll also be hearing from participants in the discussion of their ideas or their perhaps attempts at operationalizing a functional ladder. These discussions we think will go over the 5 days of the first week, and moving on in the second week to looking at the post-2015 agenda and the emerging monitoring challenges in the sanitation sector, and looking at the direction that this monitoring is taking, knowing that the post-2015 agenda is very much based on a human rights approach, and seeing how we can maybe reconcile or integrate the function-based monitoring systems with the human rights-based approach of the Sustainable Development Goals. I think this could be a very interesting week, and I hopefully Richard will be able to bring in some of his experience and knowledge to these discussions. And I think week 1 and week 2 will set up quite nicely to enter week 3, looking at the way forward and the adaptation of the sanitation ladder to the post-2015 period, discussing possible steps in view of the last 2 weeks of discussions, and maybe who knows, we can come up with some rungs, initial rungs on a ladder that could be used for monitoring. I know that's probably quite an ambitious vision for these few weeks, but let's see where it can take us. And as I mentioned earlier, there'll be a webinar looking at a particular aspect or a particularly interesting point that's raised in the first 2 weeks on Friday the 20th of February. More details will be provided on that as the date approaches, particularly with regard to the theme and the time period. Okay, I hope this brief introduction to the first thematic discussion in the series, looking at the sanitation ladder, the next steps, has slightly whetted your appetite. I'd like to thank you for your attention and listening to me talk for these past 20 minutes, and I'm looking very much forward to a few weeks of intense and productive discussion here on the SuSanA Forum. Hoping to hear from you all soon. This is Patrick Bracken. All the very best.